Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the universe changed forever. The commander sat in his office at Frontier Point, watching the stars through his window. The space station orbited a small planet at the edge of human space. It was quiet out here, peaceful even. Jake liked the silence. The alarm broke that silence with a sharp, angry sound. Jake's assistant, Mary Foster, rushed into the room. Her face was pale and her hands shook. "Commander, we're getting a transmission. It's not from any human ship." Jake set down his coffee cup. In all his years in space, first contact had always been a dream. Now it was happening, and something about Mary's expression told him this was not the good kind of contact. "Put it through to the main screen," Jake said. The wall screen flickered to life. What Jake saw made his blood run cold. The creature on the screen was tall, maybe 9 feet, and made of what looked like living crystal. Its body sparkled with different colors that shifted and moved. Where a face should be, there were only smooth surfaces that reflected light in strange ways. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere at once. It sounded like wind through broken glass. "I am Arch-Curator Vextal of the Hegemony. Your species has been observed. You have been judged. You will listen." Jake found his voice. "This is Commander Morrison of the Earth Defense Fleet. Who are you? What do you want?" The crystal being ignored his questions. "Your kind spreads across star systems like a disease. You build where you should not build. You take what does not belong to you. This ends now." Mary moved closer to Jake's desk. Her fingers worked quickly on a small device, sending emergency signals to Earth and the other human colonies. Jake kept his eyes on the screen. "We are willing to talk," Jake said. "We can find a way to share this galaxy." "There is no sharing," Vextal replied. "There is only order. The hegemony has brought peace to this galaxy for 3,000 of your years. 12 species bow to our wisdom. You will be the 13th, or you will be nothing." The screen changed. Jake saw images of massive ships, bigger than anything humans had ever built. They looked alive somehow, with surfaces that moved and pulsed like skin. The ships surrounded human colonies, blocking out the sun with their size. "You have 72 standard hours," Vextal continued. "All humans will return to your home system. All colonies will be abandoned. All ships will be surrendered. You will accept hegemony rule, or you will face complete destruction." Jake's hands clenched into fists. "And if we refuse, then you will learn why no species has ever successfully opposed us." The transmission ended. The screen went black. Jake stared at his reflection in the dark surface for a long moment. "Mary, get me Admiral Carter. Emergency channel." "Already working on it, sir." Within minutes, Jake was looking at Admiral Lisa Carter aboard the flagship UES Liberty. The Admiral was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Behind her, Jake could see other officers moving quickly, preparing for war. "Jake, we got the same message," Carter said. "Every human station, every colony, they're serious about this. Admiral, what do we know about this hegemony?" Carter's expression darkened. "Not much. Long-range sensors are picking up massive fleets, moving toward our colonies. These ships, Jake, they're huge. Some of them are the size of small moons." Jake felt cold. "How many ships do they have?" "Early estimates suggest they outnumber us 50 to 1, maybe more." The silence stretched. Between them? Jake had seen the human fleet. It was strong, modern, well-trained, but 50 to 1 odds were impossible. "There's going to be a council meeting in 6 hours, Carter said. "All senior commanders, all colony representatives. We need to decide what we're going to do." Jake nodded. "What are our options? Fight or surrender? That's what it comes down to." After the call ended, Jake walked to his window again. In the distance, he could see ships moving. Human ships, but also something else. dark shapes that seemed to eat the starlight around them. The hegemony was already here. His communication device buzzed. It was a message from New Texas, one of the agricultural colonies. A woman named Amy Rodriguez was reporting strange ships in their sky. Her message was calm, but Jake could hear the fear underneath. Commander Morrison, we've got maybe 100 alien ships above us. They're just, waiting. My kids are scared. We're moving everyone to the underground shelters, but what do we do? What do we tell the children? Jake closed his eyes. He thought about his own childhood on Earth, looking up at the stars and dreaming of the day humans would walk among them. They had achieved that dream. Now someone wanted to take it away. More messages came in. Pete Collins from New Carthage reported that strange ships were landing troops. Kate Miller from the Outer Rim said her security forces were going underground. Every human settlement was surrounded, trapped, waiting. 6 hours later, Jake joined the emergency council meeting. The main screen showed dozens of faces: admirals, generals, colony leaders, scientists. They all looked as scared and angry as Jake felt. Henry Walsh, the senior diplomat, spoke first. We have to consider negotiation. Complete surrender might save lives. Surrender. General Ryan Brooks slammed his hand on his desk. They want us to abandon everything we've built. Generations of work, gone. Better than generations of people, gone, Walsh replied. Carter listened to the arguments for hours. Some wanted to fight, others wanted to surrender. A few suggested trying to run, abandoning the colonies, and heading for deep space. Finally, Carter stood up. The room went quiet. I've been thinking about something, she said. They gave us 72 hours. Why? If they're so powerful, why not just attack? Why the warning? No one had an answer. Carter continued. Maybe they're not as confident as they seem. Maybe they're hoping we'll surrender because fighting us would cost them something. Or maybe they're just being merciful before they crush us, Walsh said. Carter's eyes were hard as steel. I've read the history books. I know what happens to species that surrender to conquerors. They become slaves, or they disappear entirely. She looked around the room, meeting every person's eyes. Humanity didn't come this far by kneeling to bullies. We've faced extinction before. Disease, war, natural disasters. We survived because we fought, because we never gave up. Jake felt something change in the room. The fear was still there, but now there was something else. Anger, determination. The hegemony wants us to surrender, Carter said. They expect us to be afraid. Well, we are afraid, but fear doesn't mean defeat. Sometimes fear makes you dangerous. She stood straighter, her voice growing stronger. Send a message to every human ship, every colony, every settlement. We will not surrender. We will not abandon our homes. We will not bow to tyrants. The room erupted in voices, some cheering, others arguing. But Jake could see the decision was made. Humanity would fight. As the meeting ended, and the commanders began planning for war, Jake thought about Amy Rodriguez and her children hiding in underground shelters. He thought about Pete Collins preparing his colony's defenses. He thought about all the humans across 17 star systems, waiting to see if they would live or die. The hegemony had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They had never lost a war. They expected humanity to surrender without a fight. They were about to learn that humans were different. When backed into a corner, when threatened with extinction, humans didn't surrender. They got angry. The attack came at dawn on New Carthage. Pete Collins was deep underground when the first explosions shook the colony. He had been working for 3 days straight, changing the geothermal power plants into something else. Something dangerous. Above ground, the sky turned red as the hegemony bioships opened fire. The living vessels hung in the air like giant jellyfish, their skin pulsing with angry light. Each ship was the size of a city, and there were 12 of them. Warsinger Morden watched from his command ship as human buildings burned. The tall, insect-like alien war armor made from the bones of defeated enemies. His 4 arms moved gracefully as he directed the attack. "This is almost too easy," he told his subordinates. "The humans build their cities above ground like children. They have no understanding of real warfare." His communications officer, a slug-like creature with too many eyes, nodded agreement. "The human ships fled as soon as we arrived. Their military is weak." On the planet below, Amy Rodriguez hugged her children in an underground shelter. The explosions above made dust fall from the ceiling. Her son, Danny, only 8 years old, looked up at her with frightened eyes. "Mom, are the bad aliens going to hurt us?" Amy tried to smile. "No, honey. The bad aliens think they've won, but they don't know about Uncle Pete's surprise." 3 levels deeper underground, Pete was making final adjustments to his trap. The colony's geothermal plants had been designed to pull heat from the planet's core, but Pete had spent months changing them. Now they would do something else entirely. Kate Miller, the security chief, found Pete in the deepest level. "Pete, we need to go. The aliens are starting to land troops on the surface." Pete didn't look up from his work. "Almost done. Just need another few minutes." "We don't have minutes. They'll be down here soon." Pete finally looked at her. His face was covered in sweat and dirt, but his eyes were determined. "Kate, how long have we been out here? How long have humans been building among the stars?" "Pete, this isn't the time for 50 years, Pete continued. 50 years of sweat and blood and dreams. And these aliens think they can just take it from us. Think they can just erase us?" Kate watched as Pete's hands moved over the control panel. She understood what he was doing now. The geothermal plants weren't just providing power anymore. They were building pressure. Massive, incredible pressure that would turn the entire planet's crust into a weapon. "Pete, this will kill the bioships, but it might kill us too." Pete smiled grimly. "Then we'll take them with us." Above them, Morden was becoming impatient. The human city was in ruins, but his troops were reporting strange readings from underground. Heat signatures were building in ways that made no sense. "Worse," his science officer reported, "the planet's core temperature is rising rapidly. This is not natural." Morden's mandibles clicked with annoyance. "The humans are doing something. Land more troops, find their underground facilities, and destroy them." But it was too late. Pete's finger hovered over the final control. He thought about his wife back on Earth, about the children playing in the shelters above. He thought about every human colony spread across the stars, all of them depending on people like him to keep them safe. "For humanity," he whispered, and pressed the button. The explosion started deep in the planet's core and raced upward at incredible speed. The modified geothermal plants had turned New Carthage into a bomb, and now that bomb was going off. The first thing Morden noticed was the light. A brilliant white glow erupted from the planet's surface, brighter than the system's sun. Then came the shockwave. The closest bioship, the living vessel called Devourer of Hopes, screamed as the energy wave hit it. The ship's biological systems overloaded instantly. Its nervous system, spread throughout its massive body, burned out in seconds. The creature that had been a ship died in agony, its death cry echoing across space. 2 more bioships were caught in the expanding energy wave. Their living hulls cracked and split as the heat cooked them from the inside. The Warsinger watched in horror as vessels that had conquered 100 worlds simply ceased to exist. "Impossible," Morden whispered. "No primitive species has ever." His science officer interrupted him. "Warsinger, the energy signature is unlike anything in our records. The humans, ... They turned their own planet into a weapon." In the underground shelters, Amy Rodriguez felt the world shake around her. The explosion above was massive, But Pete's calculations had been perfect. The energy went up, not down. The shelters held. When the shaking stopped, Kate Miller's voice came over the communication system. All teams, sound off. Pete's surprise worked. We're alive, and the aliens, they're not all gone, but we hurt them. We hurt them bad. Amy looked at her son Danny. The boy's eyes were wide with amazement. Mom, did we win? Not yet, honey. But we showed them something important. We showed them that humans don't give up. 50 light years away, Captain Steve Adams watched the explosion through his ship's sensors. His small patrol fleet had been hiding in the asteroid belt, using stealth technology to avoid detection. They had seen everything. Lieutenant Zoe Parker, his tactical officer, was staring at her sensor readings. Captain, I'm getting detailed scans of the hegemony ships. The explosion damaged them, but more importantly, I think I know how they work. Steve moved to look at her screen. What did you find? These bioships, they're not just alive, they're connected. When the first ship died, I picked up some kind of neural feedback through the others. They felt its death. Steve raised an eyebrow. They felt it. More than felt it. Shared it. Captain, I think they're all linked together somehow, like a giant nervous system spread across their entire fleet. Steve stared at the damaged hegemony ships. Several were retreating now, moving away from New Carthage as if the planet had become poisonous. Their formation was different too, less organized, more cautious. Zoe, get all this data compiled. Everything, ship configurations, energy signatures, behavioral changes. Admiral Carter needs to see this. Already on it, sir. As his ship quietly slipped away from the battle zone, Steve thought about what they had witnessed. For thousands of years, the hegemony had ruled through fear and overwhelming force. No species had ever successfully resisted them, but Pete Collins and the colonists of New Carthage had done something unprecedented. They had made the hegemony afraid. Back on the ruined surface of New Carthage, Kate Miller led teams of survivors through the wreckage. The alien landing troops were all dead, killed by the same explosion that had destroyed their ships. But among the wreckage, they found something valuable. Kate, look at this, called out Jim Norton, one of the colony's engineers. He was standing next to a piece of bioship hull that had crashed near the town center. Kate approached the wreckage carefully. The piece of hull was still warm, and it seemed to pulse with a faint light. When she touched it, she could swear she felt something like an echo of pain, of fear. Jim, we need to get this to our science teams. And we need to contact the other colonies. If these things are connected somehow, maybe we can use that against them. As the survivors of New Carthage began to emerge from their shelters, they saw something that filled them with hope. The massive alien ships that had darkened their sky were gone. In their place was empty space and scattered debris. For the first time since the hegemony had delivered their ultimatum, humans had won a battle, but Pete Collins' sacrifice had done more than destroy enemy ships. It had revealed a weakness. The bioships could be hurt, and when they were hurt, they all felt it. Admiral Carter received Steve Adams' report while the Emergency Council was still in session. As she read through Zoe Parker's analysis, her expression changed from grim determination to something that might have been hope. Gentlemen, she announced to the council, we have our first intelligence on the enemy, and it's very interesting indeed. General Brooks leaned forward. What did we learn? We learned that the hegemony isn't as invincible as they want us to believe. Their ships are alive, and they're connected. That connection is their strength, but it might also be their weakness. Carter looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. New Carthage showed us something important today. These aliens expect us to fight like every other species they've conquered, but we're not like every other species. She stood up, her voice growing stronger. We're not going to fight their kind of war. We're going to fight a human war, and they have no idea what that means. Across human space, the news of New Carthage's victory spread quickly. On every colony, in every settlement. People who had been preparing to surrender or flee suddenly began preparing to fight. The hegemony had expected swift submission. Instead, they had gotten their first defeat in 3 millennia, and somewhere, in their ancient, proud minds, a new feeling began to grow. For the first time in their long history, the hegemony was learning what it meant to be afraid. The news from New Carthage changed everything. On every human world, the story spread like wildfire. Pete Collins had turned a planet into a bomb. Kate Miller and her people had survived an attack that should have killed them all. Most importantly, the mighty hegemony bioships could be destroyed. Dr. Frank Bell was working in his laboratory on Earth when the first pieces of bioship wreckage arrived. The xenobiologist had studied alien life for 20 years, but he had never seen anything like this. The chunk of bioship hull sat on his examination table, still faintly warm 3 days after the battle. When Frank touched it with his instruments, it twitched. When he applied electrical current, it pulsed like a heartbeat. "It's not just alive," he told his assistant, Dr. Maya Torres. "It's aware. Even this small piece seems to know we're here." Maya looked at the readings on her screen. "Frank, look at this. The neural pathways in this tissue, they're incredibly complex, more complex than a human brain." Frank studied the data. "Maya, I think each bioship isn't just a ship with a crew. I think the ship itself is the crew. The entire vessel is one giant living brain. That would explain the coordination we saw in the battle reports." "But Frank, if that's true, then how do they communicate across space? Even at light speed, it would take hours to send signals between star systems." Frank was quiet for a long time, staring at the alien tissue. Then his eyes widened. "Maya, what if they don't use technology to communicate? What if they use something else entirely?" He began working with new urgency, running test after test on the bioship fragment. Maya watched as her mentor's excitement grew with each result. "Maya, this is incredible. The neural tissue contains quantum structures. They're using quantum entanglement for instant communication. Every bioship is connected to every other bioship, no matter how far apart they are." Maya felt a chill. "That means when Pete destroyed those ships, every hegemony vessel in the galaxy felt it happen. They felt their own ships die." Frank's hands were shaking as he made new calculations. "Maya, if we can understand this connection, we might be able to use it against them. Instead of just destroying their ships one at a time, we could attack their entire network. But they would need time to develop such a weapon. Time that humanity might not have." On the mining world of Titan's Rest, Carl Johnson wasn't waiting for scientists to save him. The foreman had spent 30 years digging precious metals out of asteroids. He knew how to make things explode. Carl stood in the main command center, looking at screens that showed the space around his world. 3 days ago, there had been nothing but empty space and floating rocks. Now there were 12 massive bioships moving slowly through the asteroid field. "They're being careful," observed Linda Hayes, his chief engineer. "After what happened at New Carthage, they don't want to get too close to anything that might be a trap." Carl smiled grimly. "Good. Let them be careful. Let them think they're safe out there in the rocks." For weeks, Carl's miners had been busy. They had placed explosive charges throughout the asteroid field, connecting them with nearly invisible wires. They had hidden weapon platforms inside hollowed-out asteroids. Most importantly, they had turned their mining equipment into weapons of war. "Warsinger Morden is leading this attack personally," reported Tony Clark from the communication station. "He's still angry about losing his ships at New Carthage." "Let him be angry," Carl replied. "Angry people make mistakes." The hegemony fleet began its attack at midday. But instead of hanging back and bombarding the planet from a safe distance, Morden ordered his ships forward. He wanted to crush these humans personally. to make them pay for the humiliation at New Carthage. The first bioship entered the asteroid field carefully, its living sensors probing for threats. It found none. The asteroid seemed to be just rocks, floating in space. Then Carl pressed the first button. The explosion rippled through the asteroid field like dominoes falling. Charges that had been carefully placed and timed began going off in sequence. The bioship found itself trapped in a maze of exploding rocks and hidden weapons. "Now," Carl shouted. From inside hollowed asteroids, modified mining lasers began firing. These weren't military weapons, but they didn't need to be. They were designed to cut through solid rock, and bioship hulls turned out to be much softer than rock. The trapped bioship screamed an actual sound that carried through space. As its living hull vented atmosphere and neural fluid, the scream was picked up by every other bioship in the fleet, and they all felt their sister vessel's pain. But Carl wasn't finished. His miners launched their excavation ships, small, fast vessels, designed to work in asteroid fields. But these ships had been modified with cutting tools and explosives. Pilot Sue Martinez guided her excavation ship directly toward the wounded bioship's hull. "This is for everyone who can't fight back," she said, and drove her ship's cutting beam deep into the alien vessel's brain center. The bioship's death was instant and agonizing. Its neural scream echoed through the quantum connection to every other hegemony vessel. On ships hundreds of light years away, crews collapsed in sympathetic pain. Morden watched in horror as his mighty fleet was torn apart by mining equipment and jury-rigged weapons. These humans weren't fighting like any species the hegemony had ever encountered. They were using tools, terrain, and desperation in ways that made no military sense. Warsinger, his communication officer, reported, "We're receiving surrender offers from several other species. The news of our defeats is spreading." Morden's mandibles clicked with rage. "Defeats? We've lost a few ships to primitives with mining equipment. Warsinger, the quantum neural network is unstable. The deaths are causing feedback loops. Some crews are refusing to engage the humans." For the first time in his long military career, Morden felt something he had never experienced before: uncertainty. Back on Earth, Dr. Bell was working around the clock. The quantum neural network was even more complex than he had first thought. Maya Torres had helped him understand that it wasn't just about communication. The bioships shared pain, fear, and even memory. "Frank, look at this," Maya said, pointing to her latest readings. "When a bioship dies, it doesn't just hurt the others. It makes them more afraid. Each death weakens their confidence." Frank nodded. "It's like a virus, but psychological instead of biological. Fear spreading through their network. Could we create an actual virus? Something that would attack their neural systems directly?" Frank was quiet for a long moment. "Maya, what you're suggesting ... It would be a weapon of genocide. If we sent a virus through their network, it wouldn't just kill the ships. It would kill every connected creature in their entire civilization." Maya looked at the latest battle reports. Human colonies burning. Evacuation ships destroyed with children aboard. "Frank, they're trying to genocide us. Maybe it's time we return to favor." Frank stared at the bioship tissue sample. It pulsed softly, almost like it was breathing. "I need to think about this, Maya. This kind of weapon, once we create it, we can't take it back." On the frontier world of Haven's Gate, Captain Julia Martinez was not thinking about the moral implications of genocide. She was thinking about her daughter's body, found in the ruins of an evacuation center that the hegemony had specifically targeted. Julia stood before a group of human military commanders, holding a datapad with footage from the attack. They executed prisoners. They hunted down fleeing civilians. They killed children for sport. The room was silent as the footage played. The hegemony's pacification tactics were revealed in horrific detail. "Some of you are talking about showing mercy," Julia continued. about finding a diplomatic solution. I want you to watch this footage and tell me where their mercy was when they slaughtered my daughter. General Brooks spoke carefully. Captain Martinez, we understand your pain. But if we have the power to destroy them completely, are we any better than they are? Julia's eyes were cold as space. General, the difference is simple. We didn't start this war. We didn't ask for this fight. But now that we're in it, we're going to finish it. She turned to address the entire room. Dr. Bell's virus could end this war in days instead of years. It could save millions of human lives. Yes, it would kill their entire civilization. But they made that choice when they chose to be genocidal conquerors. The debate that followed would be remembered in history books. Some argued for mercy, for finding a way to defeat the hegemony without destroying them entirely. Others, led by Julia and General Brooks, argued that the aliens had forfeited any right to mercy when they began targeting civilians. In the end, Admiral Carter made the decision. Dr. Bell will complete his research. We'll develop the neural virus as a weapon of last resort. But we won't deploy it unless we have no other choice. Julia Martinez saluted sharply. Understood, Admiral. I hope that choice never comes. But even as she spoke, Julia was making her own plans. She had contacts in the military, people who had lost family to the hegemony, people who understood that sometimes the only way to stop a monster was to become something worse. On Titan's Rest, Carl Johnson and his miners were still fighting. 3 more bioships had been destroyed in the asteroid field, but Morden was learning. The Warsinger had pulled his remaining ships back and was preparing for a different kind of attack. They're calling in reinforcements, Linda Hayes reported. Long-range sensors show at least 30 more bioships heading our way. Carl looked at his tactical display. His people had hurt the enemy badly, but they couldn't hold against those numbers. How long until they arrive? 6 hours, maybe 8. Carl made his decision. Send a message to Admiral Carter. Tell her what we learned here. Tell her that the asteroid field tactic works, but only if you have enough explosives and enough crazy miners. He paused, looking around at his team. These people had followed him into an impossible fight against alien gods of war. They had won battles that should have been losses. Also tell the Admiral that we're not surrendering. If 30 bioships want Titan's Rest, they can have it, but it's going to cost them. As his message raced toward Earth at the speed of light, Carl began preparations for the final battle. More charges were placed. More weapons were prepared. His miners worked with the calm efficiency of people who knew they were probably going to die, but were determined to make it count. The neural virus was still days away from completion. The main human fleet was still being organized. Titan's Rest was on its own, but that was fine with Carl Johnson. He had been digging in asteroids his whole life. Now he was going to teach the hegemony that humans could dig graves just as well as they could dig mines. The fire that had started at New Carthage was spreading across human space. On every world, in every settlement, people were learning that the mighty hegemony could be hurt. More importantly, they were learning that when humans had nothing left to lose, they became very dangerous indeed. The message arrived on a frequency that no human had ever heard before. Admiral Carter was in her command center when the transmission began. The voice that spoke was the same crystalline sound they had heard from Arch-Curator Vextel, but now it carried something new, something that took Carter a moment to recognize. Fear. Admiral Carter of the Human Military Forces, the voice began. I am Arch-Curator Vextel of the Hegemony. I request a meeting to discuss terms. Carter looked around at her staff. General Brooks raised an eyebrow. Dr. Bell, who had been working for days without sleep, looked up from his research. With surprise. Terms, Carter replied. 3 weeks ago, you gave us 72 hours to surrender or be destroyed. Now you want to discuss terms. Circumstances have changed. Vextal admitted. Your species fights in ways we did not anticipate. Perhaps there is room for negotiation. Carter was quiet for a long moment. Around her, the command center buzzed with activity. Reports were coming in from across human space. Titan's Rest had been destroyed, but Carl Johnson and his miners had taken 18 bioships with them. Other colonies were reporting successful defenses using tactics learned from Pete Collins and Carl's example. What kind of terms? Carter finally asked. A division of territory. Your species may keep your current worlds. In exchange, you will not expand further, and you will acknowledge hegemony authority in this sector. Dr. Bell looked up from his work. His neural virus was nearly complete, a weapon that could destroy the entire hegemony civilization in a matter of days. He caught Carter's eye and nodded slightly. Where do you want to meet? Carter asked. The neutral station was called Haven Point. It had been built by a species that had died out centuries ago, leaving behind only empty corridors and flickering lights. Carter arrived with a small escort, General Brooks, Dr. Bell, and Captain Julia Martinez. Julia had insisted on coming. I want to look them in the eye, she had said. I want to see the creatures that murdered my daughter. Vextal was waiting in the station's main conference room. The crystalline being was smaller than Carter had expected, though still impressively tall. Its surface reflected the dim station lights in patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. Admiral Carter Vex said thank you for coming. Carter took a seat across from the alien. You wanted to talk? So talk. Your species has surprised us, Vextal began. In 3,000 years of expansion, we have never encountered a species quite like humanity. You mean you've never encountered a species that fights back, General? Brooks said bluntly. Vextal's crystalline surface flickered. Other species have resisted, but they fought as we expected them to fight. Military against military, fleet against fleet. Your people turn planets into bombs, use mining equipment as weapons, sacrifice entire worlds to destroy our ships. Dr. Bell leaned forward. You're afraid of us. We are. Concerned, Vextal admitted. The neural feedback from destroyed bioships is affecting our entire network. Some of our fleets have refused orders. Others have retreated to home systems. Carter smiled coldly. Good. Maybe now you understand how it feels to be on the receiving end of a war you didn't start. Admiral, we can end this conflict now. A simple territorial agreement. Your species keeps what it has. We continue to rule the rest of the galaxy. Both sides benefit. It was Julia Martinez who spoke next. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a blade. Show them the footage, General. Brooks activated a small projector. The images that appeared made even Carter, who had seen them before, feel sick. Hegemony forces executing human prisoners, bioships hunting down evacuation transports, children's bodies in the ruins of civilian shelters. This is what your pacification looks like, Julia said, her voice never rising above a whisper. This is what you did to my daughter. Vextal's surface dimmed. War is always regrettable. Civilian casualties are unfortunate but inevitable. Inevitable. Julia stood up, her hand moving to the sidearm at her hip. You hunted down unarmed children. For sport, you made a game of killing civilians. And now you want mercy? Captain Martinez, Carter said calmly, though her own hand was near her weapon. Stand down. Julia's eyes never left Vextal. Admiral, with respect. This creature represents a civilization that has spent 3,000 years enslaving and murdering innocent species. They came to our worlds expecting us to kneel. They offered no quarter to our children. Why should we show them what they refused to give us? Dr. Bell cleared his throat. Perhaps because we're better than they are. Julia finally looked away from Vextal, turning to face Dr. Bell. Are we, Doctor? Are we really? Because I've seen your research. I know what your virus can do. Belle's face went pale. Julia, that research is classified. Is it? Julia pulled out a datapad. Because I have contacts in the research division. People who lost family, just like I did. People who think the galaxy would be a better place without the hegemony in it. She activated the pad, and suddenly the room's screens filled with Dr. Bell's data. Genetic sequences, virus models, projected infection rates through the quantum neural network. Vextol made a sound like breaking glass. What? What is this? Doctor. Bell stood up slowly. It's a neural virus designed to attack your bioship network. It would travel through your quantum connections, destroying neural tissue as it spreads. The infection rate is remarkable, Julia continued, reading from the data. One infected bioship would spread the virus to the entire hegemony fleet within 72 hours. Your own communication system becomes the delivery method. Vextol's crystalline body began to pulse with rapid, panicked light. This would not just destroy our ships. Our entire civilization depends on the bioship network. Our cities, our technology, our transportation systems, everything is connected. Yes, Julia said simply. Complete extinction, just like you planned for us. Carter looked around the room. The negotiation had become something else entirely. Dr. Bell, is this true? Would the virus kill their entire civilization? Bell nodded, reluctantly. The neural network is so integrated into their society that yes, the virus would effectively end their species. But Admiral, I created it as a defensive weapon, a deterrent that Captain Martinez apparently wants to use. Brooks observed. Julia sat back down, her datapad still displaying the virus research. General, we have the power to end this war permanently, not just win it, end it. No more hegemony. Ships attacking innocent civilians. No more enslaved species. No more children dying because alien gods of war decided to expand their territory. She looked directly at Vextol. Your people have ruled through fear and genocide for 3 millennia. How many species have you exterminated? How many civilizations have you enslaved? How many children have died because of your empire? Vextol was silent. I thought so, Julia continued. You're asking for mercy from a species you tried to genocide. You want us to show you compassion you never showed anyone else. Carter felt the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. In her hands was the power to commit genocide, to wipe out an entire civilization that had ruled the galaxy since before humans had left Earth. Arch-Curator, she said finally, you came here asking for mercy, but mercy has to be earned. What has your civilization done to earn it? Vextol's slight patterns became erratic, desperate. We offer knowledge, technology. We could share the secrets of bioship construction, of quantum neural networks. So you can betray us later, Brooks asked. So you can rebuild and try again in a few centuries. No, we would honor any agreement. The hegemony has never broken a treaty. Julia laughed bitterly. Because you've never needed to. Every treaty you've ever signed was with species too weak to threaten you. What happens when you get strong again? When you remember that you used to rule the galaxy, and we're the primitives who took it from you. Dr. Bell was staring at his hands. Admiral, if we deploy this virus, we're no better than they are. Genocide is genocide, regardless of the justification, is it? Julia asked. Doctor, if we don't use the virus, how many more human colonies will they destroy while we're fighting? How many more children will die? And what about all the other species they've enslaved? Don't they deserve freedom? Carter closed her eyes. Command decisions were never easy, but this one would define not just the war, but the kind of species humanity would become. When she opened her eyes, her decision was made. Dr. Bell, how long until the virus is ready for deployment? Admiral, please, reconsider. How long, Doctor? Bell's shoulders slumped. 6 hours, maybe 8. Carter turned to Vec, Arch-Curator. You have 8 hours to convince me that your civilization deserves to survive. Show me one reason, just one, why the galaxy would be worse off without the hegemony. Vexdal's crystalline form was flickering rapidly now. Admiral, surely you cannot be serious. An entire civilization that has spent 3,000 years conquering and enslaving others, Carter replied. A civilization that came to our worlds and tried to exterminate us for the crime of existing. A civilization that offers mercy only when it's too weak to continue fighting. She stood up. 8 hours, Arch-Curator. Use them wisely. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Julia Martinez lingered for a moment. She looked at Vextal one last time. You asked for mercy, she said quietly. My daughter asked for mercy too, when your soldiers found her hiding in that evacuation center. Do you know what they told her before they killed her? Vextal was silent. They told her that mercy was for the strong, that the weak existed only to serve or die. Julia turned to go, then paused. In 8 hours, you're going to learn what it feels like to be weak. As the human delegation returned to their ship, Carter felt the weight of history pressing down on her. In 8 hours, she would either spare a genocidal empire or become the architect of genocide herself. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. Behind them, Arch-Curator Vextal sat alone in the conference room, its crystalline body dimming as it contemplated the extinction of everything it had ever known. For the first time in 3,000 years, the hegemony was learning what it meant to beg for mercy, and for the first time in human history, humanity was learning what it meant to hold the power of gods. 6 months after the last transmission from the hegemony, Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of her flagship and stared at an empty galaxy. The UES Liberty drifted through what had once been the heart of the hegemony's empire. Around them floated the corpses of bioships, massive creatures that had once been the terror of the galaxy. Now nothing more than rotting organic matter in the void of space. Admiral, reported Commander Alex Turner from his tactical station. Long-range sensors confirmed the same readings as the last 12 systems. No active bioship networks. No quantum neural signatures. Complete network failure across the entire hegemony territory. Carter nodded grimly. Dr. Bell's virus had worked, exactly as designed, perhaps too well. It had been Julia Martinez who made the final decision, when Arch-Curator Vextal's 8 hours had expired with no satisfactory answer, when the crystalline being had offered only more promises and veiled threats. Julia had taken matters into her own hands. She had infected a captured bioship fragment with the neural virus and launched it toward the nearest hegemony fleet. The virus had spread through their quantum network like fire through dry grass, jumping from ship to ship, system to system, until every connected creature in the hegemony's vast empire felt their nervous systems burn out in synchronized agony. The death had been swift. 72 hours from first infection to total network collapse. But the aftermath was something none of them had been prepared for. Take us down to the planet's surface, Carter ordered. The shuttle descended through the atmosphere of what had been the hegemony's capital world. Captain Nathan Price piloted the craft over cities that had once housed billions of beings. Now they were empty monuments to a fallen empire. Dr. Bell sat beside Carter, his face haggard with exhaustion and something that might have been guilt. Admiral, the archaeological teams are reporting the same thing on every world. Complete societal collapse. Their entire civilization was so dependent on the bioship network that when it died, everything else died with it. They landed in what had been the central plaza of the capital city. Crystalline spires stretched toward the sky like frozen screams, their surfaces dark and lifeless. No sound broke the silence except the wind whistling through abandoned structures. Father Joe Murphy, the fleet chaplain, walked beside them as they explored the dead city. "Admiral, I've been thinking about what we've done here. The moral implications." "Father, they tried to genocide us," Carter replied, but her voice lacked conviction. "Yes, they did. But does that make this right? An entire civilization? Gone. Not just the military, not just the government. Everyone. Children who never held a weapon. Artists who created beauty. Scientists who might have contributed something valuable to the galaxy. They found what appeared to be a museum or cultural center. Inside, holographic displays still flickered weakly, showing the history of the hegemony. Carter watched images of the 12 species that had made up their empire, some graceful and beautiful, others strange and alien, all of them now extinct. Dr. Susan Gray, the chief archaeologist, approached with a data pad. "Admiral, we've been analyzing their historical records. The hegemony did enslave and destroy many species over their 3,000-year reign, but they also preserved others. Some species survived conquest and became productive members of their society." Carter studied the data. "How many species did they destroy completely?" "At least 37, that we can document." "But Admiral, they also protected and nurtured dozens of others. Their empire wasn't just built on conquest, it was built on integration." The weight of that information settled heavily on Carter's shoulders. 37 species destroyed by the hegemony over 3 millennia. 12 species destroyed by humanity in 72 hours. Back on the Liberty, Captain Rose Kennedy was reviewing reports from other exploration teams. Her family had died in the initial hegemony attacks, and she felt no sympathy for the aliens. But even she was starting to understand the magnitude of what they had accomplished. "Admiral," she said as Carter returned to the bridge, "we're getting reports from the Outer Rim colonies. Species that were enslaved by the hegemony are struggling. Without the bioship network, they've lost contact with each other. Some don't remember how to operate their own technology." Carter sat heavily in her command chair. "Explain." "The hegemony integrated their subjects so completely into the bioship network that many species became dependent on it. Without the quantum neural connections, they're reverting to pre-contact technology levels. Some worlds are experiencing complete civilizational collapse." Dr. Bell looked up from his research station. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the quantum neural network structure. It wasn't just a military communication system. It was how their entire society functioned. Transportation, agriculture, manufacturing, education. Everything was connected through the bioships." "What are you saying, Doctor?" "I'm saying we didn't just destroy their military. We didn't just kill their government. We destroyed the very foundation of their civilization. Every aspect of their society depended on something we wiped out in 3 days." The bridge was quiet for a long moment. Outside the viewports, more dead bioships drifted past like mechanical ghosts. Commander Turner broke the silence. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. Priority 1, on the main screen." President William Chase appeared. The leader of Earth looked older than Carter remembered, worn down by the weight of governing during wartime. "Admiral Carter, I've been reviewing your reports from the former hegemony territories. The scale of what we've accomplished, is unprecedented in human history." Carter nodded. "Mr. President, we estimate that over 2 trillion sentient beings died as a direct result of the neural virus. The hegemony's bioship network was more integrated into their society than we realized." President Chase was quiet for a long moment. "Admiral, Earth is receiving immigration requests from dozens of species that were part of the hegemony empire. They're asking for help rebuilding their civilizations. Some are asking for protection from other alien powers that might try to conquer them now that the hegemony is gone. What are your orders, sir? We're going to help them, Admiral. It's the least we can do. We broke their world. We need to help them build new ones." After the transmission ended, Carter found herself alone in her ready room, staring at reports from across the former hegemony territory. Refugee ships full of beings whose worlds could no longer support them. Desperate. Pleas? For technological assistance from species that had forgotten how to maintain their own infrastructure. Requests for military protection from civilizations that had never needed to defend themselves. Julia Martinez entered without being announced. The captain looked older too, marked by the weight of the decision she had made. Admiral, I wanted to talk about what happened at Haven Point. Carter looked up. What about it? I made the call to deploy the virus. You were going to wait, try to find another way. But I couldn't let them rebuild and try again in a few decades. Julia, you did what you thought was right. Did I? Julia sat down across from Carter's desk. Admiral, I've been reading the casualty reports. 2 trillion beings. That's more than the population of all human worlds combined. Carter was quiet. My daughter was 8 years old when they killed her, Julia continued. 8 years old, and she died afraid and alone while alien monsters laughed. I wanted them to pay for that. I wanted them all to pay, and now they have. Yes, they have. Julia stared out the viewport at the dead bioships, all of them. Even the children who never hurt anyone. Even the scientists and artists and teachers. All of them paid for what their military did. Carter leaned back in her chair. Julia, if we hadn't deployed the virus, how many human colonies would they have destroyed while we fought a conventional war? How many of our children would have died? I don't know. Maybe thousands. Maybe millions. But not trillions. They sat in silence for a while, watching the graveyard of an empire drift past their window. Admiral, Julia said finally, I need to ask you something. If you could go back, if you could change what happened at Haven Point, would you? Carter thought about Pete Collins, who had turned his planet into a bomb rather than surrender, about Carl Johnson and his miners, who had died fighting impossible odds, about Amy Rodriguez and her children, hiding in underground shelters while alien ships burned their world. I don't know, she admitted. The hegemony tried to exterminate us. They gave us no choice but to fight. But this was more than fighting. This was erasure. Julia nodded. The galaxy is going to remember what we did here. Not just that. We won against impossible odds, but how we won. How we took a civilization that had ruled for 3,000 years and erased it in 3 days. Are you saying we were wrong? I'm saying we became something we never meant to become. We became the thing that other species will tell scary stories about. The humans who don't just defeat their enemies, they erase them completely. Carter stood up and walked to the viewport. In the distance, she could see one of the exploration teams landing on a dead hegemony world. Soon, human colonists would follow. They would build new cities on the graves of alien civilizations. Maybe that's what we needed to become, she said quietly. Maybe the galaxy needed to learn that there are some species you don't threaten with extinction. Maybe, Julia agreed. But Admiral, what happens the next time someone threatens us? What happens when our first response isn't to fight back, but to erase them completely? It was a question that would haunt humanity for generations to come. 3 months later, the first human colony ships arrived in former hegemony space. The colonists found worlds rich in resources and empty of resistance. They built their cities among the ruins of alien civilizations, and they prospered. The galaxy learned new lessons, written in the ashes of the hegemony. Humanity was not a species to be threatened lightly. They were not conquerors in the traditional sense. They were something far more dangerous. They were the species that had answered a call for mercy with the complete extinction of their enemies. In the years that followed, when other alien empires considered expanding into human space, they remembered the fate of the hegemony. They remembered that humanity had taken a civilization that had ruled for 3 millennia and erased it from existence in 72 hours, and they decided to look for other directions to expand, Admiral Carter retired 5 years after the end of the war. She spent her remaining years helping to rebuild the civilizations that had been damaged by the hegemony's fall. It was, she told herself, the least she could do. But on quiet nights, when she looked up at the stars, she sometimes wondered if there had been another way. If mercy might have been possible. If things had been different. She never found an answer to that question. The galaxy remembered what humanity had done. They remembered it in whispered stories told around alien campfires, in warnings passed from parent to child, in the careful diplomacy of species that wanted to ensure they never faced the same fate as the hegemony. Humanity had asked for mercy. When it was denied, they had given their answer. Fire. Total, complete, and final. The galaxy would not forget.